The H1B guy here. And today, the H1B guy interviews. Mary Grace shares her experience relocating to Canada with MobSquad. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the H1B guy channel here on YouTube and like this video so that I can continue to produce more content like this for you. I also wanted to mention the H1B Guy offers a variety of consulting services. I help businesses and individuals solve complex work authorization issues in the recruitment process while bringing awareness to employment based immigration benefits. If I can help you, please reach out. I'd love to hear how. And you can book an appointment directly with me via the h1bguy.com. Today's interview is brought to you by Mob Squad. Are you a technology professional facing US work visa related challenges? Don't leave your fate up to chance. Our partner Mob Squad has a solution. Join the squad. And by PERM-ads.com, the industry leader in providing a seamless experience for employers and immigration attorneys navigating the complex PERM recruitment ad phase of the labor certification process. And by Syndesis and Path to Canada, the ideal plan B for high skilled immigrants currently located in the US whose status may be uncertain. Well, today is the second edition of the H1B Guy interviews individuals who have utilized Mob Squad to relocate to Canada. I'm very pleased to welcome in Mary Grace into this second edition. But if you haven't seen the previous interview with Sarab, I will link that video in the description below. Please go back and check that out as well. But Mary Grace, how you doing today?
Doing very well. I'm super excited to be here and share my story.
Yeah, so glad to have you on. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your week to join me here. I wanted to just get right into it and start out with really, your story and where are you originally from and why did you initially come to the US?
Yeah, I'm originally from Paraguay in South America. I'm actually visiting right now, which is kind of wild. I went to an American school, so my entire life I knew I wanted to pursue higher education in the United States. However, life didn't work out exactly as one planned, and I started university in Paraguay for I think about 2 years. Then I got the opportunity to get an internship in Washington D.C. at Conservation International, and I remember visiting schools in the U.S. and feeling that the impact I wanted to have in the world, I was not really getting prepared for that at the school I was in Paraguay. So I restarted the application process and I ended up at a school in Connecticut where I pursued a bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in economics. And that's what I did. So once I was in the US, I worked really hard to find opportunities that would prepare me to come back and have an impact here in my country. But I knew that, school was not the end all be all of learning, right? I knew that there was some professional development that had to happen and taking advantage of employment authorizations post graduation was definitely something that I kept, top of mind. Yeah, then after graduating from my bachelor's, I came back to Paraguay for a little bit, worked for a bit to reconnect here, and I reapplied to graduate school at the and I went to the University of Washington and I got my master's in public administration. And then from there, I kind of pursued more career opportunities in the United States, and I ended up staying in Seattle for from like 2017 until 2020. And then in March of 2020, I received news that I was not selected for the H1B lottery.
Hmm.
Um, and that was rough because, as we all are acutely aware of the date, March 2020, that was truly the moment where the world was in lockdown. We acknowledged that we were in the middle of something that we didn't quite understand and that could get very complicated if we didn't respond. And as I'm getting this news, I got the news that I also had to relocate. So that's,
And
my story in a nutshell.
what's most interesting about that time frame is that was the first electronic registration, random electronic selection, and it was like this completely unknown really entity and process to a lot of us in the industry. And it's interesting that your story kind of coincides with that 3-year timestamp, right? And really a timestamp I think that for many of us will never forget. So if you could go back and tell yourself probably two different times, right? Because you have an undergrad, US undergrad, and a US master's, but if you could go back, let's say to when you decided to come back to the US for your master's and give yourself really one piece of advice before you stepped on that plane to come back to the US, what would it be?
Wow. I think super transparently, I would have encouraged myself to get therapy every single week or every other week at the beginning of graduate school, because the anxiety that comes with knowing that your school, your job, your relationships, and everything is dependent on a visa situation really, really starts to grow silently in the background. And when I graduated and I knew that I had this like limited amount of time to find new opportunities, I tried to get support because I was feeling very overwhelmed.
Hmm.
Um, and I wish I hadn't discovered therapy so late,
Hmm.
because I still feel the now, we'll get into it afterwards, but I I thought I could do it all, I thought that the playing field was even. I thought that, you know, I've got good grades. I know how to do school. Um, I'm social, I can make friends. Like I
Hmm.
thought that I could handle it, but truly the challenges of immigrating and the challenges of being in a highly competitive environment and knowing that you're at a disadvantage and noticing that in small things. Like there were moments where I completely changed. My name is Maria Gracia in Spanish. I changed it to Mary Grace because I noticed there was a difference in how my applications were received in job applications. So those small things, they have this way of, it's like a compounding interest.
Hmm.
And if I had known how helpful, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy was
Hmm.
earlier, I think my relationship with, myself and application processes and interviewing and everything would have changed dramatically. I mean, and it's easy to say, what if, right? Like I feel,
Hmm.
I don't really know, but I think, right? And I would have told myself that your situation is particular. I made friends with a lot of Americans. I Everyone else had their own challenges. Everybody has their own challenge, but
Hmm.
immigrating and being in grad school in a competitive environment and also trying to find jobs and also knowing that not only can you lose the opportunity of a professional, opportunity, but you can lose all your friendships and everything at the same time. I think having prepared myself for that in a more healthy manner from earlier on would have really, really changed my
Yeah, the
perspective on things.
realization that your time here, even in master's program or 12 months of OPT, is temporary. And
Exactly.
in order for you to stay longer, there's a lot of, as you said, different steps along the way. And I think kind of going back to that 2022 time or 2020 stamp that you talked about, mental health now is much more at the forefront
Yeah.
And I think it's something that's much more discussed versus probably when you were going through that even 3 years ago. And yeah, angst and anxiety, not only of international students here in the U.S., but even folks that are already here on temporary work
Mhm.
visas, right? Like it's a very common theme. I think that surrounds, what I call the high skilled immigrant population. And it's interesting to hear you say that, like, hey, taking care of myself, getting the right help that I need to help guide me through this process is something that you would tell your younger self, right?
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about what happened after you graduated. What was your job search like? How did you go about talking to employers about, hey, my time is temporary. I'm going to need H1B sponsorship?
Yeah, so that one was so it was a multi-step process for sure. So I was very, very fortunate when I went to the University of Washington. I got a teaching assistantship right off the bat. And then beyond my teaching assistantship, I got job opportunities that allowed me to pay very little tuition. However, it was about like the second year, and I was like, okay, I no longer have the teaching assistantship now. Um, and I need to figure out how to pay for graduate school. So I decided to use my CPT and get a job in in my field,
Hmm.
uh, and start applying for that. So I did my internship at the city of Seattle in the utilities space, and I wanted to use that background I gained to then kind of apply it to the waste management space. I did environmental policy for
Hmm.
context. That was the focus of my MPA. So I got a job while I was still in grad school, and I combined it with a one credit course essentially, so that it could be a part of my degree. So I did my CPT at waste management in Seattle. But then, as I was about to graduate, I was like, okay, I need to have the conversation with my employer about, is there an opportunity here for me to get
Hmm.
an H1B sponsorship? And the the answer was no. The answer was that waste management at the time was not doing that. And if you need to delete the name, that's perfectly fine. But my employer at the time mentioned that they do not do H1B sponsorships. So, okay, I must readjust, right?
Hmm.
I was dating someone who is not my husband, and we were in a
Hmm.
serious relationship, and I knew that I really did not want to cut my time in Seattle short.
Hmm.
So, I switched gears, and in that process, I acknowledged that maybe going in the environmental field
Hmm.
that I cared about deeply in environmental policy and working in the city, working for the city in the public space, or working in the nonprofit space. Neither of those were really going to allow me to stay in Seattle.
Hmm.
Luckily for me, I had learned very transferable skills at my master's of program evaluation, qualitative analysis. Um, I learned about finance. I learned about program management, organizational management. All of these things allowed me to then make the decision of I need to move into the tech space.
Hmm.
And I was very fortunate to have found an opportunity that they needed a somebody with qualitative research skills and spoke Spanish. And that's what led me to the next opportunity where I began as a contractor
Hmm.
and I began as a temporary employee, so still no confidence that I was going to get that sponsorship. But then working hard and talking openly with my managers, to be super honest,
Hmm.
I was very honest. Like I really like my work here. I would really like to stay, and our time is running short.
Hmm.
So I asked them to tell me, and also I have to add, there was one of the founders at the new employment I had found was an immigrant himself, and he told
Hmm.
me, Mary Grace, you need to start the process for the H1B now. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, I need to, I thought it was too early to have that conversation. And he said,
Mhm.
no, have the conversation with your managers now. And
Mhm.
I was like, oh, wow, okay. I did not realize that, my
Mhm.
time was that limited. So I did, and I had the conversations and they took their time. Like it was, not an easy process, particularly because I wasn't an engineer,
Mhm.
and I think that there was a very clear policy for software engineers on how to get, the H1B process started
Mhm.
or the even the green card in some cases, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I was a part of a different department and I was not an engineer. So
Mhm.
my pathway was not as clear because my job didn't necessarily like say at the beginning that I needed to have like a master's degree for it, right? And we all
Yeah.
know that
The
that's,
way the
a
requirements were
prerequisite. Yeah,
defined. Mhm.
exactly. So I transitioned into a new role within my
Mhm.
company, and
Mhm.
then we started the process where my master's degree did come in more handy, and that
Mhm.
we were able to prove that I did need to be a highly qualified, trained,
Mhm.
individual
The masters
to
plus the
do that.
years of experience, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I
So
would
that's
call, like,
what
functional
happened.
tech that you kinda transitioned into,
Exactly.
and you're right with the software engineers, like, it's more black and white, right? The compartmentalized approach to the H-1B sponsorship, and I will tell you
Exactly.
that, the president of the company gave you great advice, like, it's never too early to start that conversation. It's something that, I present a couple times a year to master's students who are going into OPT, and it's one of the things I talk about all the time is you have to be upfront in the initial interviews of what your status is and what you're looking for in the future in terms of sponsorship, specifically H1B visa sponsorship. And I think that's just a great approach and great advice here that you're reiterating that was shared to you by an executive. Um, so let's talk about that March of 2020, right? Failed lottery, realized that you were rejected. It was a really weird time where a second lottery was held several months later. But when you found out you weren't selected the first time, when did you realize that you needed to find an alternate solution for your current situation?
So I have to be honest, immediately. I like I mentioned, was not I did not receive the news well.
Mhm.
I that's one of the things that I talk about. I wish that I had gained more skills in managing my anxiety and this disappointment, really, right?
Mhm.
Um and I immediately was, I don't think I can do this anymore. i think
Mhm.
i think that was the moment where I had just gotten knee surgery as well, so there was the pandemic. I was post-op for my surgery. um my partner was in New Zealand, stuck, couldn't come back, lots of different things happening. So it was very, very dark. I was like, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, this is a lot. Um, so painting the picture of why I say I really needed to have gained more skills and therapy and things like that. But anyways, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to find a path that allows me to, you know, build something slowly rather than, throw everything at something that at the end of the day is luck based.
Mhm.
You do
Yeah.
everything, you get yourself there, but then you jump and you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, we
So
talk
in that
about
moment,
leaving your fate up to chance, right? As part of the
exactly.
Mob Squad copy read that I do here all the time, and that's exactly it. So realized you had an issue, knew very quickly on you had an issue. So how did you find out about Mob Squad?
So I brought so the minute that this happened, I told myself, okay, strategize, right? That's the one thing I'm good at. Like, yes, it was dark and gloom, but I was like, okay, so what's gonna happen now, Mary Grace? What are your options? So before I had this, conversation with my managers about, hey, I didn't get like, we didn't get the lottery. Now what? Without leaving it fully to them, I told them I have three options. One is I go back to Paraguay and I stop working for you all, and I was building a program with the company I was at. So they were, I knew that they would, want me to stay. So,
Mhm.
but that was one of the options. The second option was I have European nationality. My grandparents were immigrants from a European country into Paraguay. So I had the option of maybe transferring to one of our company's Europe offices.
Mhm.
Um, Brexit had just happened, so we had moved our company to from like London to another place in Europe too. So that was a possibility.
Mhm.
And then the third possibility is my partner and I were Canadian and we were considering Canada already. So
Mhm.
I mentioned, or we find a way of, me being um, close to you all, near shore,
Mhm.
but in Canada.
Right.
And that little thing of like mentioning I'm open to Canada
Mhm.
sparked an idea with the HR person in our meeting who said, I actually just heard of a company called MobSquad that could help us out. That was
Mhm.
it. And that's how the process began. And I immediately knew that, okay, this this process is what I can handle.
Yeah.
I can't handle another round of H1B in the US.
Yeah, a viable option with a time frame that's pretty clearly defined. So your HR finds Mob Squad. Did you reach out to them first, or did your HR reach out to Mob Squad? Can you kind of walk me through what your experience was like? Like how did the initial introductions happen? How did your employer get involved, and what was the timeline like?
Yeah, so the timeline was very particular because we have to remember pandemic, right?
Hmm.
And I needed to leave, right? I
Hmm.
needed to leave. My lease was up too, so it was like I left by May of 2020. I was in Canada, and I speaking with the HR folks and with immigration lawyers as well. We realized we shouldn't start the process of Mob Squad and of immigrating because of the pandemic. I want to be very clear about this.
Hmm.
My circumstance, you know, you have to have the pandemic layer over it. Because of the pandemic, I it was not advisable for me to start an immigration process from outside of Canada.
Hmm.
It, it was not recommended.
Hmm.
So, because I was already a domestic partner of my current husband, we decided, okay, we are eligible to go into Canada right now. Let's go. You'll go there and you'll work remotely to the US. You'll continue your
Hmm.
work from the US, but let's go be in Canada while we sort this out and apply to immigrate to stay
Hmm.
fully from Canada. So we did
Hmm.
that. And so what the way that it worked is we talked to immigration lawyers first. We worked the initial, challenges out. Once we were in there, I mentioned that to my employer. We're here. We're like doing this. We're ready. We have all of our documentation ready. And so my situation was different than most people that apply to Mob Squad. So
Hmm.
usually Mob Squad will handle a lot of these things and they'll go through a lot of their channels to ensure that your timelines are shorter,
Hmm.
that you arrive to Canada already ready to work, right?
Hmm.
My circumstance was different because of the pandemic.
Yeah, pandemic
And
dictated the unique circumstance for
exactly.
sure.
So
Yeah.
then from there, long story short, once I had my open work permit through spousal application,
Mhm.
then then HR connected with Mob Squad. Well, they were already connecting in the background. They knew this was coming. And then
Yep.
once that was ready, it was, I don't know, a matter of a month and then I was in. Um, but my process was unique for sure. Immigration lawyers really helped me because of the pandemic. And then my circumstance, being married to a Canadian also, was unique.
Mhm. But I think you really drove the point correctly though, which is to say Mob Squad is, what I'd call kind of a Cadillac here in the US of like all inclusive services, but they can work
Exactly.
with you and your employer and help educate and guide not only you but your employer at their own time frame, right?
Mhm.
You know, if the employer needs to move very quickly, it's about 8 weeks.
Exactly.
Your situation sounded like once you got to Canada, it was roughly, about a month or more, right? So I think that that's good advice too, is that if there's options for you, to get to Canada while you're going through this transition, that may be beneficial as well. Or they can handle it sort of all in from beginning to end. So
I would sorry, one quick thing. I
yeah.
would fully recommend going the Mob Squad way
Yep.
because even getting my documentation later on, like different things like the permanent residence card, I got
Mhm.
my permanent residence card in a year,
Mhm.
even though they say it's 4 months. My Mob Squad fellow people,
Mhm.
they got it within 3 to 4 months.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
it's
their
a totally
attorneys,
different
their
process.
process, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very important to emphasize that, and that's going to be the majority of folks that are watching this,
exactly.
either now or into the foreseeable future. Uh, so what's life like in Canada?
I I think I'm finally getting to experience it now. Um, I moved in during the pandemic. My work was remote. We were very like isolated, right, for a while. So but it was still really interesting, I think in the sense I remember getting my permanent residence card and it said, "Thank you for choosing Canada." And that
Mm,
stuck with me.
yeah.
I keep bringing back like the mental health thing of the
Mhm.
stat, like being an immigrant and your status and feeling that a lot of things you kind of have to tweak to fit you, right? Like
Mhm.
everything you kind of have to readjust to make it work for you.
Mhm.
In Canada, it never felt that way.
Mhm.
I remember the one weird thing I remember I was trying to get a flu shot and I still didn't have my Ontario Health Insurance Plan card.
Mhm.
And they were so confused because I actually had to pay for it, and they were, like, so not used to someone having to pay for healthcare, right?
Mhm.
And they were like, "Wait, so what happens like this?" And but then they figured it out, and it was fine. I paid, I think, 20 bucks for my
Mm.
flu shot. But just, like, imagine that, right? Like,
Yeah.
my biggest immigrant moment was because I was asking to pay for something that I'm used to paying,
Right.
right? Like, I'm used to paying 20 bucks at a
Versus the
CVS.
universal healthcare, right?
Yeah, so that illustrates two beautiful things, right? Like the
Mhm.
feeling of welcomeness, right? That
Mhm.
there's there are ESL opportunities. Had I had a partner that was coming as well that doesn't
Mhm.
speak English well,
Mhm.
there were ESL for newcomers, or
Mhm.
there's the letter with my PR saying thank you for choosing us. Like, what a
Yeah.
beautiful way of describing the immigrant life in Canada. Thank you
Right.
for choosing us.
Mhm.
That's
And
I would
and
illustrate it like that.
as difficult as we make it here, right, is cumbersome and as complex and, confusing.
Expensive.
Yes, a lot of time and a lot of money. One of the foundations of this platform, Mary Grace, is really to help folks that are either here in the US or those that are considering coming to the US on an H-1B visa understand what's in front of them or what they're going to experience. And that's one of the reasons why Mob Squad has become a great partner, is because there is another option out there for folks that, yes, it's not the U.S., but it's become a 1A and a 1B, right? When we look at the immigrant high skilled immigrant flow that's happened. I wanted you to close this out by maybe any additional advice that you could offer for individuals that may be considering Canada as their next destination, relocating to Canada.
Yeah, I would say delete the idea that a place is not worthy because it's cold.
Hmm.
I think Latin Americans view Canada as this frozen tundra. They don't even consider it. And I found that Canada is a place with 4 seasons,
Mm,
with really kind people,
mhm,
and a country ready to, be built and worked on and contributed to.
mhm,
Um, so I would say actually look at it with fresh perspective.
mhm,
Um, don't see it as your second option. Consider it
mhm,
as your first, and look at it in the same way that you try to make the US work. Because the
mhm,
US has a lot of beautiful things, and we really try to hype ourselves up to go there because we
mm,
know that it won't be easy.
mhm,
Do that for Canada as well, because
mm,
the welcoming feeling is not minor.
mhm,
Right now, you're at home and you are thinking, "Oh, I am a hard worker. They'll see my value," um, etc. And you really minimize the roughness of
mhm,
needing to adjust everything to make it work, or the competition that exists.
mhm,
Canada alleviates that a lot,
mhm,
especially with Mob Squad and with the humans that are part of Mob Squad.
mhm,
There's a lot of folks there that understand that experience to the core.
mhm,
Um, so I would say really consider Canada as a first option
mhm,
because the pathways are clearer. And then if you're still like not convinced, then apply to the US.
mhm,
I would really encourage people to flip that coin.
mhm. And this goes back to one of the reasons, I continue to talk about other options. It's uh, I do want the U.S. to continue to be the number one destination. I do, and it's funny what you said about Latin Americans' concept of Canada. I'm just a kid from the South, and I always have had the same kind of premonitions, and I've always asked everyone who's come on, like, is it really cold in Canada as everyone says it is, right? But I think you make two great points to close this out. Like, thanks for choosing us, right? That resonates. um, and delete the idea. I'm gonna steal that from you and use that going forward because you're right. It's mindset. I talk about it a lot with my recruiting teams. Like, it's mindset. Um, your mindset is what allows you to manifest that next step. So delete the idea, delete the hesitation. That's a great point, and a lot of value in that. And your story is unique to you. It's very interesting. U.S. undergrad, U.S. masters. Yet we told you you're not welcome here. And your story, while you're from Paraguay, is not unique to individuals from other parts of Latin America, Central and South Asia, right? When we look at all of the folks that, the demand to come here to be US educated, that has that like international student dream, um, that's what makes your story common, right? But you individually, it's unique, and the time frames around it make it unique. But I'm glad to hear that you're thriving and surviving, and you're in a totally different place than where you were 3 years ago, and following the path that's been laid out in front of you. It's just a great story, and I want to thank you so much, for coming on here and sharing. Um, a really a transparent look into your journey to where you are right now in your career. Mary Grace, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this for people. I think it's really important that we talk more about,
It is.
the
It's
real crux.
conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, I always tell people I'm not an attorney. This is an opinion based on my employment based immigration experience. And it's good to have the conversation and be as transparent with it as possible. So, with that being said, I'm going to close this out and remind everyone that today's interview was brought to you by Mob Squad. Um, are you a technology professional facing U.S. work visa related challenges? Don't leave your fate up to chance. Our partner, Mob Squad, has a solution. MobSquad helps technology professionals facing U.S. work visa related uncertainty remain working with their current U.S. company nearshore from Canada, as well as technology professionals from around the world who are seeking an opportunity to find a rewarding career in North America. Through their partnership with the Canadian government, they can obtain a Canadian work permit for you and your spouse in as little as 8 weeks. So, whether you're looking to stay working with your current US company or you want to find a new opportunity in Canada, please find out how the team at MobSquad can help you via the link in the video description below. Please feel free to reference the interview here with Mary Grace today. Join the squad. And also by perm-ads.com, the industry leader in providing a seamless experience for employers and immigration attorneys navigating the complex perm recruitment ad phase of the labor certification process. If you want to reduce your costs and overhead associated with perm labor certification recruitment advertising, let perm-ads.com help you. And also by Syndesis and Path to Canada, the ideal plan B for high skilled immigrants currently located in the US whose status may be uncertain. If you're facing an H1B denial or OPT expiration, don't get caught off guard. Make sure you have a plan B, and Syndesis and Path to Canada are your answers. They'll gladly help you navigate the process. If you'd like to find out more, please be sure to use the link in the video description below. Just wanted to ask you again to please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications so that you're notified anytime we post new content here to this channel. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate your support. And one last big thank you to Mary Grace. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great rest of your trip down in your homeland and safe travels back to Canada. And looking forward to following your career and your journey as you move forward. I'm Robert. I'm the H1B guy, your global source for all things H1B.